Hello and welcome to The Quest for the Best, the show where I sit down and talk about a handful of relatively recent movies in a free-form, discussion-based format. This episode I'm going to be talking about Venom, Searching, Tag, Caliber, and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Let's get right into it. Venom, we're gonna go get him! So Venom is the new Sony Spider-Man disaster that I was kind of excited for because I thought the trailers looked so embarrassingly bad, and I'm sad to report that I'm even disappointed in terms of its entertainment in a bad way. I didn't go in wanting to hate it necessarily, but I felt like this film had a lot to prove, because in my mind Venom only goes hand in hand with Spider-Man. If you go to Eddie Brock's Wikipedia entry and Control F Spider-Man, there are about 155 results. And that's not to say that it's impossible to make an interesting film about the concept that is Venom, but for this film to be a success to me, it had to justify why this character was so unique and interesting on his own, removed from Spider-Man, and that this whole dynamic is worth telling a standalone story for. The plot of the movie is paper thin. It really is as simple as the symbiotes get to Earth, bad cynical company does testing on them, of course yada yada yada, Eddie Brock winds up with the symbiote on him, which is revealed to be Venom, and then the film really suffers from the lack of motivation from really any character. At least with Eddie Brock, him being a reporter, that kind of can explain away the character having to do pretty stupid things to get the news and all that. But when you actually find out what the symbiote's motivation is, both Venom and the other ones in the movie, it's so embarrassingly bad and simplistic and predictable and done to death that you can't help but roll your eyes. I find it very strange how Tom Hardy dropped out of Suicide Squad to be in this movie, because Tom Hardy, his track record is extremely good. He's a very talented actor. He elevates pretty much everything that he's ever been in, and yet here he's given this dull character archetype of the disgraced reporter, but he's got his own code and set of morals, and at the end of the day, he's a good guy. He's just not an interesting character on his own, not enough to justify being the main character, the main driving force of a movie like this. And of course, he has to have the love interest and all these little quirky relationships with all these people he knows. It's the Suicide Squad problem of trying to make the traditional bad guys into protagonists, and no one wants to see a protagonist who's just a massive asshole or is inherently unlikable. So instead of committing to some kind of arc where, I don't know, they go from being likable to unlikable or unlikable to likable, he just remains being a good guy for the whole movie. I think the core of the problem with this movie is just that it's a dreadful idea to begin with. I keep referring to Suicide Squad because I believe this is this year's Suicide Squad. It's slightly better quality in terms of the filmmaking than Suicide Squad, which is just a complete mess, like a total incomprehensible fucking mess. Venom isn't incomprehensible, well, some things about it are. It's straightforward, simple to follow, and the structure of the movie is very, this is a superhero movie from 15 years ago kind of thing. But what annoys me the most about it is how it's just so inherently cynical. You can see how this has been a focus-tested, researched idea from the brains over at Sony. Well, they look at the success of the anti-hero films like Suicide Squad and they think, well, we need to keep spamming out Spider-Man universe-related films so we can keep hold of the license. What character do we have the rights to that we can monetize in the most effective way possible? Well, Venom is pretty edgy. He's got a lot of fanboys. Let's just make a movie about him. But doesn't Spider-Man have to be in that story? Oh, shut up. He's cool and edgy. That's more important. And I don't want to come at this at an angle as if I inherently dislike the character of Venom. I think he could be interesting if interpreted in a way that makes sense. Everyone remembers Spider-Man 3 and how much of a joke Venom was in that movie and how strange it was. But at least the core of that character was still in that movie, even though it was packed way too much with other stuff. When the film ended, I asked my brother, who I went to go see it with, what was that movie about? And his response was, it was about setting up a sequel, and he was absolutely right. There's nothing about this film that needed to be told. There's no interesting character dynamics or story or developments or anything. The whole film exists. The whole film exists purely for the post-credit scene that's teasing the next one. A post-credit scene that is so pandering. So I nearly walked out as soon as I saw the establishing shot of what it was about to be, and it was like, oh my god, really? That's where you're going? The most obvious fanboy salivating nonsense. So something like the first 20 minutes of this hour and 52-minute film is just pointless. I was trying to figure out what was so broken about this film, and it's the fact that they stuffed the plot full of so much crap, so much unnecessary garbage, just to explain how you can end up with a symbiote fight with Venom and Riot at the end clashing. Like, the first 20 minutes of the movie could have been skipped over if they just, did what happened in Spider-Man 3 and had a meteor come down and had the symbiote just crawl out of it. That just skips a whole section of stupid, dull, monotonous setup that doesn't develop anything or add to anything. Without Venom being a vehicle for some kind of storytelling to do with Spider-Man, Venom needs to have some kind of arc or interesting story to tell by himself, and he really doesn't. By the end of the movie, the core of the character is quite similar. He's gone through a lot physically and mentally because of this alien attaching himself to him, but the only real difference is now he's very strong and powerful and sometimes wants to eat people. There's no greater context or theme or meaning other than that. I kind of liked how the symbiote, when it wasn't attached to people, looked on its own, as it kind of would slink around on glass and stick to it, and you can see every tendril stretching and spreading around like a virus. That was a somewhat interesting visual effect. But when it came down to the big Venom versus Riot fights towards the end, it was so visually noisy that I found it very difficult to be able to tell what was going on. The only time your eyes can actually scan what is happening is when they slow the footage down, Zack Snyder style, to show off their crazy goo fight special effects. And of course, because this is a superhero movie in 2018, it has to be funny. It has to be a comedy, kind of, at the same time as being a horror movie and an action movie and like a sci-fi thing with aliens. Tom Hardy is plucked straight out of a Marvel movie. It's very odd to see him combined with all of the edgy murder humor. Early scenes with Riot, the other symbiote, who's going from person to person, exactly like that video game Prototype. It's just like a live-action version of that. But the symbiote itself really has no rules. It can seemingly do anything. So it has a similar problem to the last act of Black Panther, where there's no tension because the people that are fighting are just completely invincible. I feel like I'm rambling on, and I'm going to talk more about this movie in 2019 at some point when I do a 2018 superhero movies video, where it'll be more composed than this. But to wrap up talking about this film, I don't think any element of it is very good at all. It's one of the most convenient, poorly paced, terribly managed, bizarrely structured stories of any film like this. It feels very dated for what it is. The script is dreadful, with lines as bad as, "My leg was broken, but now it's not broken. This is amazing." Kind of shit. The editing was confused and muddled at times. At points it used techniques that a lot of American comedies do. Oh look, establishing shot with pop music playing. That's quite weird for a film like this. It's tone deaf. It doesn't know whether it wants to be a dark, edgy horror movie or a funny, carefree, goofy, Spider-Man-esque kind of movie. It's clawing and desperate in how much it's begging for you to go along with it just so it can release more sequels to make more money. And the theater I saw it in was packed, absolutely full of people who were laughing and enjoying it all the way through, and I heard some of them discussing as it ended, "Gosh, I wonder what that after credits scene is all about. That must be something we need to research." I find it really slimy the way they've used the Marvel logo to almost trick people into thinking this is part of the MCU, because I bet you there's a significant amount of people who think that because this film opens with the Marvel logo, that it is in the MCU somehow. And I don't even blame the director. He's made a couple of movies that I thought were okay. I liked Zombieland. That was okay. And it's one of those screenplays that has 4 or 5 people credited for it. That's never a good sign with stuff like this. It's just a mess. The first third of the film is dreadfully boring. Once Venom comes into it, it's slightly more interesting, but it can't figure out where it's going, what's happening. For a big chunk of the film, I was confused as to what the motivations were or why or how anything was happening. And then by the end, I was so over it, I can't even really remember what happened. If this isn't the worst superhero movie of 2018, I will be amazed. The only thing that could possibly rival it is Aquaman, which is hopefully coming out in December at some point. It's especially bad considering how brilliant the storytelling in Spider-Man PS4 is, which took all the best elements of Spider-Man and combined them to deliver a fresh experience on these well-known characters. And I just hope this doesn't mean now we're gonna have a million Venom movies, because I'd much rather that character wind up in the MCU somehow, because I know they do it justice more than this. I'm just going on and on. I've got to end this. I gave it a half a star out of 5. Really do not recommend going to the cinema for this one. It was only funny to a certain point before it just became sad. Searching is the directorial debut from director Anish Chaganty. Hopefully I didn't butcher his name there. It's a drama mystery with the hook of the whole movie being that the presentation is based around every shot being limited to being either a phone screen, a computer monitor, cameras on helicopters. Think Unfriended, but with actual thought put into it. And to me, the whole Unfriended link was the main thing that was putting me off seeing this movie to begin with, because I think of how bad those Unfriended movies have been, has already put a bad taste in what could be otherwise a unique way of telling a story. And it doesn't take long for Searching to really prove that there's potential with this idea. It's a limitation they put themselves onto the movie, but it doesn't hold it back. In many ways, it enhances the way the story unfolds, and especially in the way the story is presented to you. It's a nice way of being able to show instead of tell. It's almost like combining the two, because you're just reading people's thoughts as they're typing them. It's almost like typed narration in a way, from the perspective of our main character, John Cho, who is the father of the daughter that goes missing, and I'll leave it as vague as that, because the real fun of this movie is going along with the dad character, trying to figure out the mystery of where she went. Is she alive? Is she dead? What is really going on here? And has plenty of twists and turns that quite ingeniously trick you, and you slap yourself on the head for thinking, oh, why didn't I see that coming? That seemed quite obvious. And going back to the presentation of this phone screen, almost screen recording software angle they went with, I was looking up that the film only took something like 3 weeks to shoot, and most of the production was spent effectively animating what the computers were doing. So in a sense, it is almost an animated film that you never even notice is animated, because it's just a screen of a laptop, the mouse moving around and going into emails and FaceTiming people. And I really appreciated the level of detail they went into depicting how people actually use computers, how people actually communicate. Every character felt true to their kind of age and the level of expertise they would have on these different forms of communication. Like even writing the girl in the film is about 16 years old, and I think adults writing dialogue for characters of that kind of age can come across as quite cheesy and as if an adult has written it, but I thought for the most part it was quite solid. I really liked how the soundtrack was used. It could be a bit sappy and over the top at points, but there are some really good tracks that drive along the mystery aspect while he's searching through, and it gets to a point where it's like, oh, that's a clue, and then the soundtrack kicks in and really adds a sense of momentum and mystery and puts you on the edge of your seat. I liked how the film touched on this idea of how fake a lot of people are when it comes to social media and that kind of thing, how it's all about your image and how you come across to people on the platform as opposed to how you actually feel. I'm not sure how well it would hold up on a rewatch now that I know all the secrets and all the mysteries. I'm not sure if points might drag. There's a whole section where the dad has to figure out how to get into his daughter's email and little things like that, which are a whole process which might not be that fun to watch again. But that's not to say I'm not somewhat interested to see it again, to see how it holds up. I thought it was well acted. There are some genuinely quite powerful moments in it, but I'm a sucker for any relationship like this about like fathers or parents and their kids, and that kind of dynamic is easy to manipulate me, but I found it quite effective. And they were creative enough with the range of ways they showed different angles, be it a phone screen, be it a helicopter camera, be it laptop screen recordings, that it never got too repetitive. It was almost at the brink at points. There were a couple of scenes where I felt this is almost restricting the story capability of the scene. It almost made me wish that at a certain point in the movie it would break the restriction of the presentation and go more into a traditional kind of visual presentation for some kind of dramatic effect. And maybe it wouldn't have worked necessarily in this movie, but it's a fun idea to think of the different ways you can play with how your film looks and the way you can use it to enhance a story. I think of a film like Mummy, that doesn't restrict itself in terms of being all screen recordings, but it does restrict itself with its unique aspect ratio, which does play into the story directly. Overall, I just really enjoyed it. It's a great drama, a genuinely interesting story from beginning to end, is unique enough to put a fun spin on what would otherwise be the type of story we've seen time and time again. And yeah, I would recommend this one. I gave it a 3.5 stars out of 5. Tag is one of those comedies. You know the ones I'm on about, the ones that kind of have a few good ideas in the concept phase, but by the end of it, just like completely forgettable, but not annoying or offensive enough to even warrant getting angry over. I quite like the idea behind Tag. It's supposedly based on a true story of a bunch of friends who have been playing the same game of tag for most of their lives, for years and years and years, with quite an interesting lineup of actors. You got Ed Helms, who you expect to be in a film like this. It's a very Ed Helms comedy type of movie. But then you have John Hamm, Jeremy Renner, and a couple other like decent actors in here that I'd say comedically don't work very well. They're all very much those kind of predictable archetypes where you've got the stoner one, you've got the funny black guy, you got the one who's really committed and has a crazy wife. And it kind of bugs me how they have this crazy kind of creative, fun premise, but they had to adapt it into the most formulaic Hollywood script you can possibly imagine. I feel like it would work so much better as a 30-minute short, or if it was animated, because then you could really go absurd with the concept. But as it stands, it has elements of absurdity, but then elements of realism that they expect you to have some kind of emotional response from, which felt kind of cheap and tacked on to me. And you've got a really mixed bag of comedy where some of it is genuinely funny. I found it consistently humorous enough to where I didn't want to turn it off. It wasn't bugging me. I get so tired of characters that smoke weed and that's their whole personality. Yeah, great, weed is funny and smoking weed is just the most hilarious thing ever, but it doesn't make up for the lack of actual jokes to do with it. It's no setup or payoff, it's just, oh, I smoke weed and that's funny. Oh, I'm high, that's funny. There's an interesting theory that Hannibal Buress, I've heard it pronounced different ways, wasn't in the original filming of this movie and was added all in post. I think it's quite unlikely that happened, but if I was to rewatch this movie with the idea that all of the Hannibal scenes were added in after, that adds an extra layer of comedy that does make it a lot funnier. Isla Fisher is in the movie and she's probably the worst thing about it. Her character is so ridiculously over the top, to the point where it's just like, no one acts like this, and it's not funny that you were bigging it up to this degree, especially when things in the movie are revealed. It just is weird. It doesn't work. The gimmick of Jeremy Renner being this really OP kind of action star who's really good at martial arts and has never been tagged before is probably the most fun thing about the movie. It's the only time they ever show off any kind of visual flair, because a lot of it is shot in a very basic American comedy kind of way. A lot of flat angles, so the camera doesn't move very much when there's no action or anything. But then whenever there is something to do with Jeremy Renner and him avoiding them, there's some fun kind of slow-mo stuff and some decent choreography that is shot well enough to the point where you can actually see what's going on and it's not just a complete mess of shaky cam and other annoying action tropes. It looks like this is director Jeff Tomsik's directorial debut. He's directed a lot of television and shorts, and there's some promise here. I could see him going on to do something else. I feel like the script and the screenplay is really what's lacking. It never elevates itself above the premise. The only thing that really keeps the movie going is the fun, goofy premise of the movie. None of the characters are particularly interesting. None of the jokes or acting are that good. There are some moments that are quite funny. There are other moments that will make you wince. It's fine. Completely forgettable. Once the movie ends, you will have forgotten the whole thing. Maybe you need to be totally blazed like Jake Johnson's character to be able to enjoy it to its fullest potential. But from my experience, I give it an okay 2 out of 5. Right, so Caliber is a very interesting Netflix movie that I haven't seen many people talking about. Another directorial debut here from Matt Palmer, who tells this very interesting story about a couple of friends who go up to this isolated Scottish village for what seems like a normal kind of hunting trip you'd do in a secluded place like that. And of course, it's one of the classic spiral stories where one little thing goes wrong and everything totally goes out of control. And I won't spoil anything more than that, because the fun of the movie is the ride of wondering how the characters are going to deal with an impossible situation such as this. And the two lead actors, Jack Lowden and Martin McCann, are really what drive the movie and keep it grounded. They give really genuine performances that instantly make it feel like there's some history there. They give them character without a bunch of unnecessary monologues and the normal kind of thing that could bog a movie down like this. Unfortunately, I felt that the movie peaked somewhere in the second act, where you've already kind of figured out what type of movie it is, where it's going, and the limitations that come with this kind of script. At an hour and 41 minutes, it did feel a bit too long, because the plot is so bare bones and there isn't much going on outside of what the characters are going through. In the way that the film is presented, I felt that towards the end I was starting to check my watch and I was waiting for some kind of conclusion. It was well shot, the mood and tone was somehow very claustrophobic, but at the same time sprawling and open, as these characters are hopelessly shambling through what starts off as a beautiful, luscious setting that turns into a dark, gloomy, terrifying one. It's just an exciting thriller. I don't think I'd want to watch it again, but I think for what it was really solid, especially seeing how a lot of these Netflix films are coming out and they're total garbage. It's nice to see one that's attempting a bit more, that's clearly some kind of passion project born from an idea. Currently, I have the film down as a 2.5 out of 5, which might be slightly harsh. I might up it to a 3, but I think if you like heavy, depressing, morally ambiguous movies that force you to put yourself in the character's shoes to try and figure out what you would do in their situation, then you'd probably get a lot out of this movie. But for now, I'm going to stick with the 2.5 out of 5 because it didn't leave that much of an impression. The ride was fun. Well, not fun because it's quite heavy, as I said, but it was enjoyable. As a piece of filmmaking, I had a good time watching it and didn't get too bored or distracted because of how good the production was on all fronts. Alright, let's end on Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. This movie's been talked about to death already, so I'm not going to stay too long on this one, but I watched it recently, and of course it's total dog shit. I'm a huge fan of dinosaurs. I'm not even going to try and hide that. They are just the coolest things ever. Like, come on, what is there not to like about dinosaurs? And I think the amount of money that these stupid Jurassic Park films make kind of proves that a lot of people agree with me. It's just a shame that we get films like this that don't utilize the fact that dinosaurs are cool and you can do fun things with them within a story at all. I don't hate the first Jurassic World as much as everyone else does. I don't think it's good by any means. I did kind of like how the MacGuffin super dinosaur that they made was this statement on how audiences are getting harder and harder to please because they just want the biggest, most bombastic, stupid shit ever. That doesn't excuse the bad characters and the overall just stupid nature of that film. But this is one of those sequels that makes me question, well, Colin Trevorrow, he directed the first Jurassic World and he wrote the second one. Am I giving that first film too much credit? Because this film is so schlocky. It does that thing a lot of monster movies do that bugs me. And it's specifically when a monster movie or creature movie where the main thrust of the story is to do with some kind of otherworldly creature or shark or animal or anything like that, where the plot only progresses because of creatures being constantly aggressive all the time. It makes sense in the second half of this movie where yet again there's just a super dinosaur that has been engineered and it's just the exact same thing as the first Jurassic World movie. But for the first half of the film, whenever they show any carnivorous dinosaur, they will go ludicrous lengths to try and eat people or other dinosaurs. And I just find it annoying because animals don't do that. An animal won't put itself in danger and risk its life to eat a tiny person. So a lot of the scenes just fall under, why is this dinosaur going to these lengths just to eat like a tiny scrawny human or pester a human? What's the point? Why would it be doing that? Oh, because it has to be a big, dumb, stupid movie where dinosaurs chase people and try to kill them. And of course, there's an element of that in the original Jurassic Park, the only good Jurassic Park movie. But I'm only left wondering about that kind of thing when I have absolutely nothing else to attach myself to. Every character is so bargain bin, goddamn predictable. Oh, it's Chris Pratt. Wow, he's He's charismatic, isn't he? What's his actual character though? We know nothing about him. He's just cool. That's his character. He's a cool guy who looks handsome and is strong. And the same can be said about Bryce Dallas Howard's character. She's just an attractive woman who cares about dinosaurs. They're paper thin and really uninteresting. And even on the most surface level, the thing that constantly remains fun in these Jurassic Park movies are what kind of crazy scenarios the writers and creators can think of to put dinosaurs in to make a tense scene or an action scene or something like that. The first Jurassic Park has countless great tense scenes that utilizes the dinosaur angle very well. Even the very mixed bag Jurassic Park The Lost World, or whatever it's called, has that amazing scene with the T-Rexes on the mountain with the truck, and of course the scene at the end where the T-Rex is running around a city. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom doesn't have an original bone in its body. The most original idea it can think of is spoilers, and this really is not for anything important, but to try and manipulate the audience, they kill off the first dinosaur that you see from the original Jurassic Park. I was reading through the trivia, and apparently it's supposed to be the same dinosaur. Somehow. And when that's the emotional center of your movie, I don't know what to tell you, but goddamn, this is one empty film. And it's been pointed out before that this film is like two different movies stitched together. The first half is very similar to the second Jurassic Park movie where they go to try and save the dinosaurs from the island that's going to explode or whatever. But then the second half is all about a genetically engineered super dinosaur in a claustrophobic, scary house. It's just full of really bad scenes and characters doing things that are extremely irritating just to either further the plot or get killed in a stupid way by a dinosaur. It's not a bad looking movie. Nothing annoys me more when these big blockbusters look visually terrible, but there are countless really good shots in this film that, if placed within a movie with an actual good script and interesting story and characters, might be impressive. And on a pure technical level, it's fine. But it is so stupid to the point where it's very frustrating. And not even dinosaurs can save it for me. At least the next one has potential to be even bigger and even dumber based on the ending of this one, so can't say I recommend it. 1 out of 5 stars. Okay, so those are the 5 movies for this episode. I feel like that's a better mix of movies compared to the last one where it was pretty much all stupid Hollywood blockbusters. A bit more of a varied lot this time. Thanks for watching and listening, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye!